Today, I'm going to talk a little about one of the biggest gardening mistakes I'm prone to making and how to avoid it. The short version, though, is if you're only planning where you're going to plant your next round of crops in your garden, while also failing to account for the amount of time your different crops will take to yield a harvest, chances are you're probably going to start tripping over yourself within the next 6 months or so. I would know, as this is a mistake that I seem to make pretty much every season, and I've made it since I've been growing vegetables. If you're like me, and you only have a relatively small space in which to grow stuff, planning your garden months in advance becomes absolutely critical. So I'll elaborate a little bit more on this. Here I have some 3-week-old seedlings that I'll be planting out fairly soon for my fall and winter garden. Most of what I have are relatively fast-growing brassicas, broccoli and kohlrabi, as well as some lettuce that is already starting to outgrow its starter pots. I also have some root veggies, including onions, rutabaga, and beets. And as anyone who has grown root veggies knows, they take a freaking long time to produce a root bulb of the size worth harvesting. They take even longer than usual in a fall or winter garden due to the short days and cool temperatures. For example, rutabaga take 105 days to harvest under optimal conditions, so I'm anticipating that if I plant them out in October, I might be harvesting them sometime next spring. Same deal with bulbing onions. If I can get them to bulb at all, it's going to be a very long wait. Now, if I'm not careful, my slow-producing overwinter root veggies are going to stand in the way of future rounds of crops that I have planned. Initially, I intended to plant most of my brassicas in this bed here and to plant my slow-growing root veggies in these wine barrel planters on my patio. Luckily, I was hit with a rare moment of common sense before committing to this garden plan. The reason this would have been a terrible idea has to do with my love of growing both potatoes and tomatoes. So I do my best to grow 2 crops of early potatoes per year. I start round 1 like these here, sometime in late summer. I know they'll be killed off by frost sometime in late November, giving me a decent harvest of small to medium-sized tubers, which is fine. My second round, I like to start in late January or early February. They'll grow slow through February and early March on account of the short days and cool soil temps, but then take off in late March and April when conditions are closer to ideal for potatoes. For best results, I really need to be able to grow my spring potatoes through most of the month of May. But I don't want to grow my spring potatoes here, where my fall potatoes are now, as I'll need that real estate for tomatoes sometime during the first half of April, when my potatoes won't quite be ready to harvest just yet. Now, I also plan on growing tomatoes in this bed here, so it doesn't make sense to plant spring potatoes after my short-lived brassica crops are done here, probably sometime in December. This makes the most logical spot for my spring potatoes on my patio in these large containers and planters, but I won't be able to do that if I have a bunch of other root veggies taking their time to finally mature. So the obvious solution is to grow my broccoli and kohlrabi primarily on my patio, knowing they'll be done well before it's time to plant my second round of potatoes. Once I harvest the potatoes, sometime in early May, I can use the patio space for peppers, which honestly do best when transplanted out a little later than tomatoes, as they really don't care for the chilly nights we tend to get through the month of April. This brings us back to the long bed here, which is where I'm going to plant my overwinter root veggies. I won't need this space for tomatoes until the first or second week of April, and if they haven't matured after 7 months, I'll just cut my losses. Some of you might be wondering, what about the rest of your gardens? You're leaving out about 1/3 of your space. Well, some of my beds don't get enough light in the fall and winter to reliably produce anything worth harvesting, and unfortunately I have to shut down about 8 of my raised beds this winter in order to deal with a fusarium infestation. Unfortunately, my overwinter garden has to be a bit scaled down this year. Speaking of fall and winter garden prep, I've finally made the call to pull the last of my tomato plants here. While indeterminate tomatoes like these will technically stay alive and continue to produce until a frost or other factor kills them, in my experience, production and plant health decline late in the season as fall arrives, to the point that the number of tomatoes they produce aren't really worth the space they take up. Sometimes the plants will put on new growth as temperatures moderate in early fall, but fruit production slows with a shortening day length. And in my climate, the plants will probably be killed by the first frost before much of anything else has a chance to ripen up. Unfortunately, everything I'm removing here has to be discarded as opposed to recycled. It's all going in the compost municipal green waste bin. And as any returning viewers to my channel are probably sick of hearing about, I'm battling a Fusarium outbreak in these beds, and every bit of matter I remove needs to be treated as contaminated. All the plants, all the mulch are going in the green waste bin to be removed from the property. I really hate to discard organic matter, as it's not easy to cheaply obtain for an urban gardener such as myself, but in this case, I really have no other option. And here are the last of my tomatoes. Some of the green ones will off the vine, others won't. I'm honestly not too concerned, as my total tomato harvest for the season is sitting at just below 400 pounds, so I'm not going to get too torn up over a few pounds that don't ripen. And now I have this series of beds ready to be sown with a cover crop as soon as the weather cools off just a little bit more. It's always nice and refreshing to have a garden in a blank slate mode at the end of a season. One more quick tangent before wrapping up. I decided one of my winter projects is going to be replacing this row of annual beds here with some kind of perennial fruit trees or shrubs. As of now, my wife and I have settled on relatively compact fig and mandarin varieties for the space, but I'm also open to other suggestions. If anyone has any ideas of perennial fruit-bearing plants, trees, or shrubs that won't overgrow this space and become kind of a nuisance for neighbors, and thrive in a Mediterranean climate like the one I have here in the Sacramento Valley, I would honestly really love to hear about it. I know I'm getting to a point in my gardening where I'm decent at growing annuals, but things like perennial fruit-bearing stuff, I'm a complete beginner at. I'm starting from absolute zero here. So yeah, like I said, if anybody happens to fancy themselves an expert and has some ideas, I would absolutely love to hear about them. And that's really all I've got at this transitional point in the seasons and the garden here. So until next time, let's hope it all doesn't die.